has represented District 9, Diamond Head to Hawaii Kai, in the Hawaii State Senate since 2016. He chairs the Senate Committee on Housing. And so please, once again, join me in welcoming Senator Stanley Chang.
All right, before I begin, how about one big round of applause for Lynn and for all the other volunteers who made this conference possible today. So I am sorry to disappoint those of you who thought the last panel was the last session of the day. And so my presentation is actually, even though it's at the end, it's titled, "We Gotta Start Somewhere." And let me refresh your memory for those of you who are familiar with the Aloha Homes Plan, the affordable, locally owned homes for all plan that we introduced last year. It involves building high-density homes at state-owned lands near rail stations, 99-year leases, a fixed low initial price of $300,000. They're going to be sold to Hawaii residents who will be owner-occupants and own no other real property, but with absolutely no restrictions on income and absolutely no first-time homebuyer restrictions. We'll be laying out these high-density developments with a lot of ground floor retail. We're going to have a state equity share of 75% of all the profit of all trades on the secondary market. This will also be a revenue-neutral program, absolutely no taxpayer subsidy, and absolutely no profits being made by the government. And of course, the biggest component is this program will be building enough supply to meet demand year after year, decade after decade, just like they do in Singapore. Some of the benefits that we have for this program is that we will not require new taxes. We will not have to touch 1 inch of conservation and agricultural lands. No redevelopment of existing residential communities. We'll be giving priority for purchasing units in new developments to those in existing nearby communities who are impacted by those developments. We will be absolutely no windfall profits to these people who sell their units because of, again, the 75% state equity share. We will not permit any wealthy overseas investors, and we will also have airtight enforcement of owner occupancy. These units at $300,000 are going to be affordable to people making only 53% of AMI. That's a family of 4 making just $64,000 a year. Because of the urban planning, we can do safe, desirable neighborhoods with the ultimate, the king of all real estate amenities, which is a 5-minute walk to everything, including public transportation. Every future generation of Hawaii will get the chance to live here. We'll be reducing the stigma associated with public housing and affordable housing, and of course, these are going to be one of the most environmentally sustainable ways to live that we have here in Hawaii. Now, you've been here since 9 a.m. You've heard a lot of details, a lot of nitty-gritty and nuts and bolts, and I'm usually the one to be able to do that. So I'm grateful that today, aside from this, we're going to be focusing not on the nitty-gritty, but on the big picture. I just want to emphasize 3 major principles today. I'm going to zoom out from the individual aspects of the Aloha Homes Plan, and I want to talk about some of the big unifying principles. And they are, first, supply, not demand. Second, concerns, not constraints. And finally, unity and not division. All right, let's start with supply and not demand. All right, so when we talk about affordable housing, most of the time, a lot of the discussion focuses on demand-side solutions. So for instance, people will say, well, we have too many luxury condominiums, or we have too many wealthy investors from Asia and overseas, or too much of our housing inventory is snapped up by Airbnb or other vacation rentals. We have people coming in from overseas, like from Micronesia. We have people moving in from the mainland, whether that's second homeowners or folks who move here from the mainland. And one subset of that, of course, is this paranoia that we have about mainland jurisdictions sending homeless people here. And of course, a lot of people will argue, well, our property taxes are just too low, so it's a very attractive destination for overseas capital. And there's something to all of these issues, but really, I want to focus on demand. And by the end of this segment, I want to prove to you that unless we solve the supply issue, we are never going to solve the affordable housing crisis in our community. All right, let me try to explain first with an analogy. And that analogy is the transportation market. So we all agree that we have an affordable housing crisis, right? Okay, do we have an affordable transportation crisis? Do we? Well, how much is the cheapest new car on the market today? Anyone want to guess? Anyone in the car business? $15,000. That's pretty close. According to Motor Trend, it's this $14,000 new car, right? Well, guess what? Someone at 30% AMI, a homeless person, does not have the means to shell out $14,000 for a new car. So what do? They catch the bus. That's one option, very reasonable. We're talking under $100 a month for a bus pass. Ride a bike is another very affordable option. And of course, we have the option of secondhand car ownership. You can go on Craigslist today. If you only have $1,000 to spend on a car, there are cars that cost $1,000. And even on Craigslist today, you have cars that are absolutely free. Why is this? The car market is a healthy, functioning market because supply and demand are always in balance. Because the more demand increases, supply is unrestricted. If you are a car dealer, if you are anybody, you are welcome to import as many cars as you like. So demand will never outstrip supply. Another reason I choose the car market as an example of a healthy, functioning market is that there's a very prominent example of a car market that is not healthy. And of course, I'm referring to this country. Does anyone know where this is? This is Cuba. There's a high demand for cars that keeps growing because their population is growing. But in Cuba, a 1958 Chevrolet will cost a lot of money, and most people will never be able to own any car. Why is that? It's because of a supply restriction, the United States embargo that started in 1962. Because supply is capped in Cuba, the market has distorted to this point where very old cars become very valuable and new cars are out of reach to all but the very, very few. Okay? So Cuba's car market is like our housing market today. All right, let me try one more analogy on you. Now, this is an example of an existing new home, a new condo that's being built in Hawaii today. As you can see, it's extremely luxurious. And in that respect, it's also very, there are not that many units like this being built. And in that respect, it's kind of like our education market. If all of the new construction really is just like private schools. There's not that much of it, it's expensive, and it's never going to be able to provide the needs for the middle class or even the lower middle class of society. New construction is like the private school market. And I'm okay with that. We're okay with private schools in Hawaii as long as we also provide a public school option for those who cannot afford the high tuitions of private schools. And of course, that's exactly what we do in Hawaii. We provide DOE public schools that today educate 83% of our young people. And it's okay to have private schools as long as we have public schools also. Okay, so let's walk through some of these numbers. I'm going to show you the numbers from 2001 to 2018. Because those are the numbers that we have for for the births, the deaths, and the new housing construction. And I want to give a special shout out to Chris Albritton, our intern, who provided the statistics and the research for these slides. Okay. We have total births in the year 2001 in the city and county of Honolulu, 12,858. Total deaths, 5,884. So let's forget about all the immigrants, all the homeless people from, the mainland jurisdictions. We are just talking about local people. There are 6,974 new local people in the year 2001. Okay? If you divide that in two by making the unrealistic assumption that all of them are going to get together and stay together in a two-person couple, you have 3,487 net new couples in the year 2001. Well, the number of new housing units we got was just 1,895. Okay? So it doesn't matter if all those new couples are billionaires. The housing simply does not exist. All right, here's another visualization of that in emoji form. 1,592 units was the shortage in just the year 2001 alone, and I want to give out a shout out to Michelle Kurihara-Klein, who graciously volunteered to create these visualizations. All right, the year 2002 was not that different. Again, we had greater births than deaths. We had net population growth just among local people. And yet again, we had way more net couples than we had new housing units coming online. So now let's look at the cumulative growth in the population. So in just 2 years now, you're seeing that these numbers are starting to build. All right? Do you think that the trends are changing? Well, in 2003, yet again, we have a significant increase in population and a much smaller increase in new housing units. The same is true for 2004. 2005 is one of the few years where we actually have more new housing units than net couples, but we're back to a shortage again in 2006. The shortage worsens in 2007. In 2008, it gets worse again. As the financial crisis hits, we're seeing a really severe shortage. This is the worst year, 2010. We have way more new net couples than new housing units, and so this is a cumulative visualization of what we're talking about here. We have a shortage of 2,662 units here, but as you can see from the bottom two lines of this PowerPoint, we have way more net couples than we have housing units that have been built in the period from 2001 to 2010. And let's continue to play the tape. We have a structural system that is providing way fewer new housing units year after year than we have new net couples, okay? So, here's 2016. This is one of the years where we actually do have more housing units than net couples, but again, the deficit that we've accumulated over so many years means there are so many more net couples that need housing than we have housing units. All right, and let's look at the full gap from 2001 to 2018. There's a cumulative shortage of 21,409 housing units. Okay, so again, it does not matter if all of those new couples are billionaires. The new housing simply does not exist. There is only one way. We can kick out all the foreigners, we can kick out all the mainlanders, all the vacation rentals, all the Airbnbs, but we will not solve the affordable housing crisis. There is only one way that we can solve the housing shortage, and that is by building more. Okay? By building more. Some may argue, well, we'll never be able to build our way out of this crisis, and that's just untrue empirically. All right, we've heard a lot about Singapore today. 2018, 17,000 new flats, and as you can see, they are building an average of 18,570 new units over the past decade, with another 50,000 units under construction today to continue that pipeline. And the policy planners are maintaining a consistent but small oversupply in order to prevent prices from going up. All right? The official policy of Singapore is to build more supply than they have demand for, which is why Singapore, since the 1960s to the present day, has the best affordable housing program in the entire world. Okay? And as we already saw in Professor Fang's presentation, they've built public housing all over their country, all over their island, and this is what it looks like today. Let's go to the only serious other rival to Singapore for the title of the world's best public housing. This is, of course, Vienna. And again, in Vienna, housing construction keeps up with demand. Okay? Vienna is a rental-based system. As you can see, they put a lot of emphasis on design. They have beautiful architecture, a very innovative and creative architecture. But what they share in common is that they build enough supply to meet demand. And that is why I want to emphasize that principle number one is that we need to be focusing on supply. Supply is the answer. All right, let's go to principle number two. Concerns, not constraints. What do I mean by this? There are a lot of objections to new supply in Hawaii, a lot. I'm just going to highlight 5 right here today, again, in emoji form. But what I want to emphasize is, as we've heard all throughout the presentations today, while these are issues that we should be aware of, that we should be concerned about, they are not constraints to the scale of new supply that it would take to meet demand. All right, so let's start with the first. Land shortage, right? We don't have enough land, okay, is the common refrain that you'll hear in Hawaii. Now, obviously, this island is not Hawaii. Does anyone know where this island is? Maldives, very good. This is Male, the capital of the Maldives. And if you want to talk about I wanted to look for slides that depicted a land shortage. Now, clearly, this island has a land shortage, right? They have built out absolutely every square inch of their territory. Now, as we've heard again today, many slides, Singapore is less than half the size of the island of Oahu with over 5 times the population. This is the territory of Hong Kong. It is less than the size of Oahu, and it has over 7 times the population of Oahu. And the reason why I want to highlight Hong Kong is because, you know, there's this common idea that Hong Kong is this dystopian Blade Runner-ish urban jungle. Well, let's take a look at that and see if that's true. First, let's take a look at the overhead aerial shot of Oahu. Okay, this is the Hawaii that we know and love. The vast majority of Oahu is undeveloped. It's pristine mountain forests and aquifers. It's absolutely beautiful agricultural and conservation land in the central part of the island and the northern part of the island. This is the island paradise that we cherish, that is absolutely fundamental to the identity of every single person who grew up here in Hawaii. All right, well, let's look at Hong Kong. This is Hong Kong. And it turns out that while Hong Kong's development is very dense, 3/4 of Hong Kong is undeveloped. It's just as lush and green and verdant as the island of Oahu is, in some ways even more so, okay? And you can see that only 24% of Hong Kong's land is developed. 3/4 of Hong Kong land is in the form of parks, agriculture, greenbelt, mountains, you name it, undeveloped land. It is possible to greatly increase the population just through density alone without impinging on 1 inch of the precious agricultural and conservation land that we cherish so much on Oahu today. Here's just one more slide for Hong Kong. This is the so-called Greater Bay Area, Hong Kong plus its surrounding communities in mainland China. And ironically, even though we think of Hong Kong as the most, you know, dense Blade Runner-ish landscape out there, it's probably the greenest part of the entire Greater Bay Area. Dongguan, just incidentally, is where your iPhones and Apple products are made. Zhongshan is where most of the Chinese community in Hawaii is from. All right, let's keep going. These are some slides next where I want to show you what density means. Okay, so this blue spot right here in the Aieta, Kapolei, and Makakilo area, of which we are currently sitting in the middle, is actual 67,500 households and approximate dwelling unit density of about 4 dwelling units per acre. Okay, if you're familiar with this community, these homes exist today. These are not hypothetical homes. These 67,500 homes exist today, and they're mostly single-family homes. There is some multifamily, but not a lot of it. Okay, so this is how much land it takes to build 67,500 homes with the existing suburban sprawl paradigms that we've had here in Hawaii and in this country. Now let's take a look at some other denser developments that are that currently exist today. Here's the area near Don Quixote in Ala Moana, and as you can see, with 1,334 units on 5.54 acres, we're talking about 241 dwelling units per acre. Okay, this community exists today in Hawaii. All right, here's another community that exists today. Again, not a hypothetical community. The Chinatown Mauka area, Capitol Place, Honolulu Park Place, some of these towers you might be familiar with. This is 247 dwelling units per acre. And again, this exists today. You don't have to go to Singapore, we don't have to go to Hong Kong. These levels of density exist today right here in beautiful Oahu. If we are to take this approximate 250 unit per acre level of density, that's all the land that you would need. Okay, and if we kick up density even further, this is the Hong Kong Han Tat housing estate. This is one of their new public housing estates. 11 towers over 16 acres, a density of 585 units per acre. I want to highlight for you that there are only 385 parking stalls for 9,300 plus units and over 23,000 residents. That's basically zero parking, right? At a density of 585 units per acre, that's all the land that you would need. Okay? So we could potentially accommodate decades, if not centuries, of housing growth on existing urbanized lands by applying levels of density. And the reason, by the way, I'm using 67,500 units is because that's the 10-year housing demand for the state of Hawaii, not just Oahu, for the entire state, according to a recent report by the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. All right, last year I introduced a hypothetical example, purely illustrative, of 7 existing state and city-owned parcels that if they were developed at the existing density of 250 units per acre that we have in Honolulu today, that could address the 10-year housing needs of the entire state, and that's all the land that you would need. That's just the 7 patches of blue space that you can barely see in this slide, okay? We do not need a lot of land. A land shortage is an interesting concern that we should have, but it is a concern that we have an answer to, and that is density. Simply applying density that exists today on the island of Oahu. All right, let me refresh your memory. There's 67,500 households that exist today, and there's a potential 67,500 homes if we were to take those 7 parcels. Okay, a second big issue that I won't spend a lot of time on, when people talk about the concern of carrying capacity, they're usually talking about a limitation on the water supply that we have on this island. And we had a presenter earlier today, Barry Usago from the Board of Water Supply, who made it clear that we have about 407 million gallons per day of sustainable water supply, of which we only currently use about 145 million gallons of water per day. And if, in fact, we are able to grow in the future through high-density housing units, that those units would actually need a lot less water than the existing suburban sprawl model. I'm not saying we need to use all of this unused capacity, but I'm saying we have a long way to go before we start to hit the limits of water consumption that is sustainable on this island today. All right, money shortage. Now, one of the big issues that we talk about here in Hawaii and across the country, because we tend to think of affordable and public housing as subsidized housing, how are we going to pay for this? Well, to refresh your memory, in our Aloha Homes proposal, we are not asking for a single penny, not 1 penny of taxpayer subsidy. Absolutely zero. Revenue neutral, absolutely no subsidy. Okay, well, is that a pie in the sky idea? Let's look at Singapore, a real world example. I stole the slide from Professor Fang, who just presented, who was kind enough to loan it to me. I want to direct your attention to some simple math here. Okay? You can see in line 4, net deficit before government grant. Okay? That's the deficit. That's the subsidy that they're asking for from the government, $2.0 billion, which, as you can see 2 lines down, the government simply writes a check to HDB for that amount. Okay? 1 line up from that is $0.3 billion. That's the Cpf Housing Grants that they give to new homeowners every year to help them cover the cost of those new homes. So the total subsidy from the Singaporean government taxpayers is $2.3 billion. Let me direct your attention now to the bottom, the last line of this chart, $3.0 billion. That's the amount that HDB has to write a check for every year to buy land from the Singapore Land Authority, another government agency. 3.0 billion is larger than 2.3 billion. If Singapore's HDB did not have to pay for land, they would be revenue neutral. In fact, they would be revenue positive today, delivering 17,000 new units. Okay? Now, I have proposed that because the state has no cost basis for these parcels, that the state should not charge money, so to speak, to the government agency that actually develops these units. So we do, in a sense, have free land here in Hawaii. Okay? And here's a real-life example of how if you have free land, you can achieve a revenue neutral or even a revenue positive public housing program. All right, here's another big one. If we're going to propose adding thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of new units, people are immediately going to think of the absolutely dreadful gridlock that plagues our highways every single day. Okay? Clearly, we do not have the number of roads, the amount of roads that it would take to achieve 1 car per resident if we're building thousands and thousands of new units. We don't even have enough roads for today. All right. As I showed you already in Hong Kong, you can build developments with almost no parking, almost no cars, basically zero. And I just want to give you a couple of quick examples that exist in Hawaii today that illustrate that point. All right, this is a slide that shows downtown Chinatown, okay? And one of my favorite restaurants in Hawaii is the Pig and the Lady. Anyone here been to the Pig and the Lady? Okay, people are familiar with it? I think it is probably one of, if not the best restaurant in the entire state. Okay? And it is a popular lunch destination for those of us who work at the state capitol, as you know. Now, if I'm going to get from the state capitol to the Pig and the Lady in Chinatown, how am I going to get there? I'm going to walk. I'm not going to drive. I don't know anyone who would drive from the capitol to the Pig and the Lady. Well, this is a 0.6 mile walk. I mean, this is not all that close, right? It's a 13-minute walk, which in our summer heat is not nothing. But we are happy to walk that distance. Okay? And this is just kind of a broader illustration that within a 13-minute walking radius, we have in the neighborhood that exists today of downtown Chinatown, all your essential services, grocers, post office, banks, dry cleaners, doctors, dentists. Everything you could possibly need, including jobs, is within a short walk. You truly do not need a car if you're within this area. Another good example, if you're familiar with Waikiki, if you wanted to get from the Sheraton Waikiki on one end of Waikiki to the Marriott, the other end of Waikiki, how are you going to get there? Are you going to drive? No, you are going to walk, okay? Just show up any day, evening, any time of day or night in Waikiki on Kalakaua Avenue, and you will see thousands of people making this trek. And you will see very few people driving between these two distances. And we're talking about 0.7 miles, another 13-minute walk. Okay, another illustration that you do not need a car if this is what if this is what your neighborhood is like. And we heard that again reaffirmed by the residents of HDB housing in the last panel. All right, this is a little bit awkwardly phrased, but we're all deeply concerned about the environment here in Hawaii. We all know that we live in one of the most unique ecosystems in the entire world, okay? How is a massive increase in housing supply going to affect the ecosystems, the habitats, the conservation, the ecology of this jewel, this absolute jewel of the Pacific Ocean? Well, let's start with carbon emissions. Okay? This is a chart showing all the carbon emissions of the state of Hawaii in the year 2015. The largest slice of this pie, 56%, is stationary combustion. This is electricity. Okay, this is power. And as you may know, by 2045, we have a renewable energy goal of 100% in the state of Hawaii. And in theory, this entire 56% can be erased by the year 2045. The second largest slice of this pie, which we have broken out, is ground transportation. This is cars, okay? 36% of the carbon emissions. That means if you pull someone out of their car and if you encourage them to walk, if they are a non-car owner, if they're walking, this second largest source of carbon emissions pretty much goes away, okay? That means that we will be able to achieve by 2045 the absolutely remarkable feat of making every new resident of our proposed Aloha projects carbon neutral. Absolutely incredible. I don't know that there's a single community in the United States that has achieved this distinction, okay? So by doing highly walkable communities, we are going to be dramatically reducing our impact on the environment. Okay? One other benefit, again, as we've already reiterated, high density means you will not have to touch 1 inch of agricultural land, not 1 inch of conservation land. These pristine environments will be preserved forever by producing new housing stock in this form. Another important thing that I want to emphasize, existing neighborhoods. These are existing single-family neighborhoods. This is most of our housing stock in Hawaii today. Here's a slice of Hawaii Kai in East Honolulu. We are not proposing that any of these neighborhoods be redeveloped. We're only talking about state-owned lands that are currently being used for non-residential purposes, such as community colleges, such as a stadium. All right, so I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that we have a lot of issues that we're concerned about in Hawaii, justifiably so, many of them related to the fact that we have such a unique position in the middle of the Pacific. But while we should be aware of these issues, they are not handcuffs, and they will not constrain future growth of the population in Hawaii. This is the third principle that I want to talk to you about, unity and not division. Okay? If you've been to Singapore, you will recognize that these are the 4 major racial and ethnic groups in Singapore. We have the Chinese majority, we have Indians, Malays, as well as the, unfortunately named other category. In Hawaii, we would call them, they're mostly Hapa, what we would call them in Hawaii. And Singapore, as you may know, places a lot of emphasis on racial unity. As we've all heard, there are racial quotas. They want all of their public housing to be racially integrated. Okay? This is a product of the unfortunate history in which the racial groups did not get along in the 1960s, which caused Malaysia to kick Singapore out. That's why Singapore is an independent country today, because of the lack of racial unity. And that's why this principle is really at the core of Singapore's national identity. We have the luxury in Hawaii, I don't know why, but we do have the luxury in Hawaii of having the highest intermarriage rate in the entire world. And over 40% of our population is ethnically or racially mixed in some way. I don't know why. I'm hard-pressed to find local people who can explain why, but it's something that we take for granted, and it is just a fact. And the New York Times just did a big piece on this earlier. So we may not have to talk about the the racial integration that Singapore has, but what I really do want to talk about is socio-economic integration. And that means housing for all. You'll recognize this slide from last year's conference, in which we have made clear that there will be absolutely no income restrictions and absolutely no first-time homebuyer restrictions in the Aloha Homes proposal. Absolutely none. If you are a billionaire, you will be welcome to buy one of these units. And I'm going to be candid with you that this is probably one of the most controversial facets of the proposal. Well, I don't know that it should be so controversial, okay? When you send your kids to public school, DOE does not ask you how much money you make. When you want to drive on the public highways, DOT does not ask how much money you make. And when you want to enter the public parks, the Parks and Recreation Department does not ask you how much money you make. Public services are for the public, okay? And let's take it a step further. What if I were to ask you, what if I were to tell you that Pierre Omidyar, wealthiest person in Hawaii, were to pull his kids out of private school and instead send them to DOE public schools, followed by community colleges, followed by the University of Hawaii? How would you feel about that? Would you react by saying, wait a second, I am a pauper compared to Pierre Omidyar. Why should I have to pay taxes to pay for his kids' education when he's more than capable of paying for their private educations? Of course not. That's absolutely not the reaction that we would have. Okay, why not? Because equality is fundamentally embedded into our national DNA. If a public school is good enough for the poorest among us, it should also be good enough for the most privileged among us, okay? This is America. We have equality, okay? And that should be equally true for housing, not just for education, not just for highways, and not just for parks. This is, I think, what Lee Kuan Yew was talking about when he was talking about wanting to ensure that everyone in Singapore had a stake in the future of the country. He wanted a nation of homeowners. He wanted a nation where everyone was equal. They all had an equal right, because they were owners, to live in, to thrive in the nation of Singapore. And that is the challenge that I believe that we're facing today. We have a community where a substantial fraction of the population will never be able to truly have a home in Hawaii because they will never be able to buy a home in Hawaii. We have another political excuse too, all right? A political reason. This is the federal budget. You may recognize it from our presentation last year. The first three parts of the federal budget are the large majority, and actually the fourth, if you add in the fourth, that's the very large majority. Does anyone know what these four pieces of the federal budget are? Yep, Medicare, Medicaid is number one. Number two, we have Social Security. Number three, we have defense. And number four, we have interest on the debt. And by the way, that little square blue in the corner is housing. That's the Housing and Urban Development Department. Okay, what do these top three, and really the top four even, what do these have in common? They are for everybody. They are not means tested, right? Medicare, Social Security, even Donald Trump qualifies for, and of course the Department of Defense protects him just like it protects every American. And that's why they're incredibly popular. Even Donald Trump has pledged never to cut Social Security, Medicare, and defense. Okay? So you can call it public goods, you can call it public services, you can call it equality of opportunity, you can call it socialism. Whatever you want to call it, making services available to everybody, regardless of income, is extremely politically popular. Okay? One prominent example of somebody who did want to cut these services is Paul Ryan. Okay? Where is Paul Ryan today? Where is Donald Trump today? Even Republicans are in favor of public services being given equal access. I mean, we have a depiction of an actual instance where there were people in line to buy market rate condominiums just a few years back. My answer to that is, that would be fantastic, Because in one fell swoop, you are telling me that we would be able to achieve something that no jurisdiction in the history of American public housing has been able to achieve, which is the destigmatization of public and affordable housing. You're just assuming that. You're granting us that argument, even though no one across this great nation has actually ever solved this problem. All right, well, then let's celebrate that we will have solved this problem, that rich people will want to live in public housing. We should be thrilled by that. And, you know, of course, if it's good enough for rich people, it's good, you know, the middle classes and everyone else will want to live in there too. Well, we're not going to be able to ramp up to meet demand with new supply immediately. So what do we do about all those who will not be able to move in right away? And the answer is to keep building. That will create a large political impetus to keep building. If we have lines around the block for our initial pilot projects of this concept, well, that'll show that this pilot project is a resounding success, that there is a large amount of demand for it, even among the very wealthy, and that we will be able to achieve the political support needed to expand the program to truly fulfill demand. Let me talk about one other aspect of the equality of treatment that we're talking, the unity of treatment, and that is the equity share. Okay? Equity share is not a new concept. Here's HCDA's existing regulation. That, again, to refresh your memory, we're proposing that the state will take 75% of the profit for all public sector trades in the secondary market. So if you buy your initial unit at $300,000, you sell at $500,000, you're only going to be able to keep of that profit $50,000 because 75% of it is going to go back to the state. What can the state do with those funds? Why is that important? Well, first of all, we're going to be prohibiting windfall profits. Okay, you're not going to be able to, you know, gamble in the secondary market by keeping 100% of the upside. All right. Another thing that we're going to be doing. Does anyone know what this is? Mold. This is not mold. Air conditioning. Not air conditioning. Very good. We have some real estate professionals here. This is spalling concrete, and this is the nightmare of everyone living in an aging, high-density condo or apartment tower because maintenance of spalling concrete is big bucks. What do condo towers do today? Well, they force their owners to write big checks, assessments, they're called. If you're on a fixed income, if you're elderly, it is not that easy to come up with a big assessment check. That's just a fact. And we do need revenue streams, such as an equity share, to help pay for these types of major capital and maintenance and renovation projects. Here's another issue where we really need unity. On the mainland, if you're familiar with communities like Boyle Heights in Los Angeles, like Brooklyn in New York, one of the big, most divisive issues is something called gentrification. Okay? And usually what happens is existing landlords kick out mostly low-income tenants, they flip their properties to affluent home buyers who are moving in, and they make big windfall profits. Okay? That is extremely divisive because those profits exit the community and the existing community is left without the benefits of this trading in the secondary market. Well, what we would be doing by clawing back 75% of all those profits is we would be ensuring that all of those new profits would remain within the community, that it would go to benefit the existing tenants, the existing owners who have no intention of moving. So if you stay put, but all of your neighbors are flipping their units and moving out, well, you will get the benefit because you will see increased maintenance, you will see increased repairs, you will see better landscaping. That is the opposite of gentrification. It is providing additional services to those who really do need it, okay? And that's what we mean by uniting and not dividing. This is a picture of a new public housing project in Vienna. Wouldn't it be great if America had public housing with this level of amenities, parks, lakes, and so on? All right, so let me just review. These are the three principles that we're talking about. Supply and not demand, okay? We should be aware of all the potential objections to new supply, but we should mitigate them and deal with them in an effective and an efficient manner. And again, we need to unite the community. We should not be dividing the community by socioeconomic level or anything else. Okay, so who agrees with me that we need high-density housing that follows these three principles? Okay, great, fantastic. Now, what if you say that, wait a minute, we already have too many towers, too much traffic, too much noise congestion in Hawaii today. Actually, we don't want major population growth, okay? That is not something that we need for the future of Hawaii. Does anyone agree with that perspective? I see some folks, I see some folks in the audience, and actually you folks are in the majority and have been for at least as long as I've been alive, because as we've seen, we have decades of undersupply in Hawaii, okay? I just have a favor to ask of you. We are currently in the first semester of the senior year of about 18,000 high school students in Hawaii. Okay? In about 6 months' time, it will be time for their graduation. And I have no doubt that some of you, leaders in our community, active in this sector, will be asked to deliver their commencement addresses. And this is the favor that I want to ask of you. You can tell them congratulations, that it was great that they were born and raised and educated here in Hawaii. But I want you to tell them, you gotta leave, and you cannot come back. This is no longer your home. We will not build you a home. That is the reality of the decisions that we have made and we will continue to make year after year, decade after decade. That is the truth. These will be adults by then. They deserve to hear the truth. We, as their leaders, as their stakeholders, we owe them the truth. But it turns out that the truth is a pretty good place to start. All right. For those of you who do agree that we do need to take that step forward and build enough housing supply for our future generations, that every generation of local people deserves to have a home in a community, actually, I have a favor to ask of you too. Okay? We have to start, because this is a very long and arduous road ahead. And that favor is to get involved. We have a pro-housing petition, paper copies of which are being distributed to all of you in the audience today. You will be able to sign up on our housing website, hawaiihousingconference.com, to add your name as well, to make it clear that publicly owned state lands should be maximized to their highest and best use of affording every generation a home right here in Hawaii. I want you to consider joining a pro-housing organization, okay? 2 examples are Faith Action for Community Equity, of whom we have a number of members right here today, as well as the Hawaii Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice. And there are their websites right there today. You can sign up right now. And of course, finally, I'm asking for you to make your voices heard at the legislature. I know you are busy. I know it takes time to show up to testify in person, and I know it takes time to write a letter of support, to write a letter to the editor, to tell your friends and neighbors when candidates come around, to tell your candidates in your local community that you are committed to housing here in Hawaii. I get it. This is a long road ahead. This problem is not a new problem, and this problem will not go away overnight. If we are able to solve this problem, we will do something that many of the great communities around the world, Hawaii, the Bay Area, Southern California, New York, Tokyo, London, Hong Kong, many more, that none of them have been able to solve. It will not be easy. It will be difficult, but we gotta start somewhere. We gotta start somewhere. And that somewhere is right here. Thank you very much for your kind attention today.